Oh, let me just share this to my Discord.
And I'm here with Argent. He's looking similar to mine. He
Uh,
disclaims from video games and such stuff like that, and he looks at it through a Christian reactionary viewpoint. How are you doing tonight, Argent?
Good, good. Thanks for having me on. Always good to meet another Leaf who is sane in the frozen north. It definitely is frozen this week.
Oh yeah, it's that's just the kind of that's just the country we're in. So tonight, what we're going to be talking about is uh, reactionary thought and how questions about the modern world and several of the problems that we face and that we often address on YouTube. How reactionary thought can answer the questions that are the mainstream and the mainstream intelligentsia seems just so unable to really address. And we're also going to be talking about Canada in particular. We're going to be going over a lot of the these problems as they apply to Canada. So I'll start us off by saying that for those of you who don't know, reactionary thought is a pre-enlightenment way of thinking. There's a misconception that people think it means like you want to like restore absolutism or you want to like restore an old era. That's not really what it means. What it means is that you you're looking at the world at a pre-enlightenment kind of viewpoint, and it's a rejection of the liberal enlightenment kind of view of the world, view of history, and view of things like government and such. And I find personally that the many questions that we have in modernity, reactionary thought's able to answer a lot of the questions we have with small issues like culture, like identity, and then bigger issues like relationships, families, social welfare, and then even extremely controversial issues, even to things like race, ethnicity, democracy, and it seems to be this a very strong critique of the modern world. And before we get started, I hate reminding people this, but please like and share this stream because it needs to get the traffic on it in order to get it out to more people. So yeah, you can help me out by doing that. But I'll pass it over to Argent. So what's your channel about, Argent?
Well, I cover a lot of stuff. I'm It's always hard to talk about yourself. So yeah, I just have cover a wide variety of topics from kind of a right wing perspective. I have a series called Reactionary Reviews where I do like kind of in depth, I don't know, movie, video game reviews, whatever, and I kind of talk about the political, psychological, philosophical aspects about them. I also do just political videos, history videos. I do some e-drama stuff, and I like to do kind of satire videos every now and again. Um, it depends. I'm bipolar, so whatever I'm in the mood for, I just try to kind of go with a bit of variety um, of different things to cover. Um,
Okay, and you've also written a book. So what's your book about?
okay, so my book is No Chance: A Postmodern Odyssey, which is kind of it's a I don't know if you want to call it a reactionary critique of the modern world, but it takes place in the near future Los Angeles, and the main character is Jeremy Evans. So he's like one of the last kind of I guess you could say white people in Los Angeles. And he's kind of it's an exploration of kind of the dissolution of postmodern society. So he works like a dead end minimum wage job. He's kind of in part based on Elliot Rogers a bit. So he's obsessed with like getting a girlfriend, etc. And it's kind of about his descent into kind of the desolation around him and then kind of him crawling out of that and kind of trying to become like a more powerful and a better person. But it kind of has my trademark blend of extremely dark humor, um, kind of take no prisoners, etc. Like just for example, do you know who Common Filth is?
No, I don't.
Okay. Common Filth is known for being the most he was like the most black pilled person on YouTube. He was famous for basically he would do like an hour long multiple hour-long podcasts a week where he would go and dig up the most disgusting like stuff he like fetishes he could find and just like complain about them. So like in my book, I have a character like based off of him called Average Degeneracy, and he like worships AIDS because he believes it's God's punishment sent to destroy the earth. So he has like a cult where they like give people the gift. So it's just stuff like that, but it's always hard to explain your own book. Um, so somebody was asking, my avatar is an Espeon with a Cairo on its head.
Yeah. So if you're interested, I'll provide you guys a link to Argent's book. If it's something that might interest you, then I suggest you can check it out.
Actually, you know what? I'll give you. I have the first chapter of it actually read on my channel. I'll send you a link to that.
Okay,
I got a friend of.
I'll add that. I'll add that at the bottom. Once we're done. But yeah, you can post it in the live chat if you'd like.
Okay. Thank you for letting me shill.
Yeah, no problem. So I guess I'll start us off that I see kind of the world as I see it is kind of hard to pinpoint exactly what is wrong with the modern West, like what is causing this kind of societal degradation that we're seeing, this kind of loss of culture, loss of identity, and then loss of even your nation in many senses, in many cases, and it can be traced back to, some people might blame it on Marxism, they might blame it on liberalism, maybe some blame it on the welfare state or capitalism or other such forces. I find that the reactionary standpoint on that is that there's just a general civilizational crisis and there's civilizational decay that it seems like as we advance and become more wealthy and we become more prosperous and we advance technologically, it seems like the pillars of our society, our culture, our identity, our traditions, our way of life, and it seems like it's just rotting away. And our authority structure also, it seems like it's, as we've advanced technologically, that seems to be kind of rotting away. And I find that's kind of just the general trend that the West has been on for, you could argue that it's since the Enlightenment, and I think that a lot of people would say the last 50 years have been very evident to that. I think that the big problem is with liberalism. It's that it kind of views people as these blank slates that you can really just you just need to give people the right education. They need the right social workers. They just need equal opportunity, and then everyone will fit into this. Then you can just fit anyone into this liberal society, and they'll be a full functioning member.
The term I like to use is interchangeable.
Yes,
sorry, just I'll wait 1 sec. Just because the problem with equal is there's forms of equality, like legal equality is not necessarily a bad thing in some contexts, or you can talk about it in economic terms. But and this is kind of my view of left versus right. The most left-wing position possible is that people are exactly the same, to the point that you're the physical junk you're born with, like your physical gender is interchangeable. Literally believing somewhat like a male can have children. Whereas right is more emphasizing that there are differences between people and that's natural.
Yeah. And I also do find that, like, kind of in the modern world, we have this conception that really all people really need is just maximum freedom and and then maximum wealth. And that's really all that's really needed in order to create this, to give people a fulfilling life. And I think that that's really not the case. I'll pass it over to Argent. So what do you kind of see as the fundamental problem in the West right now?
Okay, so if I can just go into lecture mode for a minute.
Go ahead.
So my thesis is, I call it the crisis of postmodernity, which I think as a society, would you say that we were a lot more hopeful in the 60s?
In the 60s, I don't know. I think that's kind of when we were on the decline. I'd say pre-World War One.
I mean, there was more faith in liberalism being able to create this better equal world. That one day, as Mark Stein put it, we'll all be sweet and then there will be no more war.
Yeah, okay. I'd say that was definitely like at the end of the Cold War that seemed that was the...
So we had that. It was going to be the end of history. And then it didn't happen. We didn't get real equality. The baby boomers, for all their fake nihilism, in a lot of cases led pretty traditional lives. They had they were faithful to their partners. They had, a lot of them got divorced, but most of them had children. They still had kind of the white picket fence as their ideal. They still largely married within their race. Some of them even kept going to church. The thing is, like, they espoused all these extreme ideas, but very few of them, when they relatively few of them actually lived up to them when they grew up.
Mhm.
And even now you'll have this whole, like, people living in their all white suburbs saying we need more diversity, or I want marijuana legalized. If I catch my kid with a joint, I'm going to freak out. So all this, so they had this, but then we also, obviously, we don't have real equality. There's still disparate impact. There's still more black people in jail. There's still there's a real sense that people don't like diversity. They don't like the direction society's going. And so out of this, you have two groups. I call them the bastards of postmodernity. You have the dissident right and you have the SJW. The SJW's viewpoint is this failed because we didn't go far enough. This failed because our parents weren't committed to it enough. So what we have to do is we have to force all this. We have to bring in thought crimes. We have to force people to mix together. We need more immigration, etc. We need full commitment to real equality now. Whereas the dissident rights perspective is this was wrong. This whole thing failed because it was fundamentally flawed from the beginning.
Yeah, I tend to think that, what people may refer to as progressivism, SJW, or cultural Marxism, whatever you want to call it, like kind of radical progressive thought that you can see in the academy today, and we talk about online all the time. But I find that that's kind of like the answer to why liberalism didn't create the equality that it promised, really. Like, because what the idea was that in, say, the 1960s, and this is really kind of just a fundamental idea in liberalism, is that you just have to give people the equal opportunity. You just got to give them enough education. You just got to give them the right framework. You just got to not get rid of, I don't know, racism or sexism or something like that, and then they'll have equality. And then I guess the dilemma that we're kind of faced is that never happened. So you kind of have the progressives of today. Their line is, well, we just didn't go far enough. We just haven't done enough to create this equality. And I'd say that the dissident right, the reactionary perspective, is that this belief in the blank slate, this belief in human interchangeability, it's fundamentally flawed because it fails to understand human nature. And I'd say if to list a few of the mistakes I think that liberalism and progressivism, as an extension of that, make in relation to human nature, it's that people aren't interchangeable. You can't just put anyone into any society and shake it up and expect it to work. I think that people don't necessarily want freedom and don't necessarily even crave freedom. They kind of crave stability. They kind of crave a lot more of certainty. And I also think that authority is something that really is just kind of natural. And societies tend to just develop natural hierarchies, and that kind of is just something that seems to always develop. And then I think lastly, I think people don't even really want equality. I think a man in nature, people want dominance. They don't want equality. It just seems that equality seems like it's whoever actually believes in it is just the sucker who's gonna give away what he has and just be taken advantage of, really. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, it takes a lot of brainwashing, I find, to kind of undo what's natural in people, because people generally just want to be around people like themselves, of their religion, their ethnic group, their culture. They'd rather be around that. They've done those studies in Sweden or wherever, where boys naturally want to play with guns and robots, and girls naturally want to play with dolls. These things are just, they develop just kind of on the whole. One of the things that kind of brought me to reactionary thought was when I started to study kind of the history of the world. And I found something like that the traditional family unit basically developed independently in every successful society. Like within the Aztec society, which is no relation whatsoever to anywhere else, you had married family, one man, one woman, children, similar gender roles that you'd find in Japan
There
or
were some that
Europe.
had polygamy, but
Okay, polygamy, that's true, but polygamy is generally only practiced by the upper class.
uh
It's not necessarily widespread. But once again, that doesn't undermine gender roles,
oh
really.
yeah, yeah. I think that it is kind of something that just the society really just needs a way to actually kind of just raise its next generation. It's something that is really universal, because if they didn't have that, well, they wouldn't be able to reproduce themselves really.
Yeah, and it's just, I guess for me, reactionary thought is if you look at every society and his successful society, because what they'll say is, oh, there's some random tribe in Africa that never
Yes.
invented fire and they're matriarchal. And as I say, yeah, that's my point. But you do see these common trends that develop between them. And I think at a base level, like do is anyone, and you can say this because you also come from Canada, do you find, or I'm not sure how old you are, do you remember back before like it was quite as big a thing?
I'm 23.
Okay, you're 20. Okay, I'm 28.
Oh,
So
when what was quite a big a thing?
when it wasn't quite as diverse, because
Oh,
like when I was
yeah,
growing
I
up,
okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
do you know Markham?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so when I was growing up, Markham was 90% white.
Okay, it's not like that anymore.
No, it's like 80% Chinese now.
Yeah.
But I mean, in general, do you find people here are happier now that it's changed?
No, I would say they aren't. I mean, it's kind of something that I've grown up with, because I'm from the Toronto, just like you.
Yeah.
But I find that, like, if you go to somewhere like Northern Ontario, or if you go to, say, PEI, or Newfoundland, or one of these kind of old places where Canadian uh, culture, and it's still, and the Canadian people really still are the dominant majority, it does seem like there's a lot more social cohesion, and that does seem like there actually is a lot more of a culture, really.
Are you familiar at all with Putnam's work?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Because I mean, it has been proven that diversity makes people less happy because it hurts social cohesion. Like I think we're just going with something that I just don't think would naturally exist to the same extent in other parts of in other times and places in history.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
the
Oh,
the
yes, continue.
idea that you would bring in a large minority and then change your culture to accommodate them, I think is something that's just kind of a fairly new idea. Well, I guess maybe they brought Greeks in, but in general, it's just people. It was accepted for most of human history that you naturally want to be in your own culture around your own people, and now for some reason that's hate.
Yeah, and I think that, like, the other problem though is that in the liberal society that we live in, that they don't have any answers for these problems. They don't have any answers for the problems of that, things like diversity bring about. They don't have any problems for they don't have any answers for the solutions to these many problems. They can't explain why after 50 years of affirmative action they still have the same there's still the same outcome in schools. They can't explain that why say for instance black people might go to jail more often. They can't explain why we're just unable to have stable monogamous families anymore. And there's no way of them explaining these things away. And I find that when you have this egalitarian mindset, it twists your mind into not being able to see what's so blatantly in front of you many times. Have you ever noticed that?
Yeah, and that's I think actually because a lot of people really hate SJWs, but I will give them credit. They at least get what the problem is because they go straight to race, class, culture. They don't really pretend. They don't really play the same like, oh, if we just gave everybody equal opportunities game. I think they implicitly realize there are these differences. They just want to correct them by force. But they understand things like identity are more important than economics at a base level.
Yeah, because yeah, they are kind of like the answer to the problems that liberalism just can't solve. It's like, if you haven't been able to solve these, like, societal problems with through liberalism, but if you maintain this kind of blank slate egalitarianism, that's what it leads you to. It leads you down the pathway of radical progressive thought.
Because I think they've implicitly rejected the interchangeability thing, and they just feel that we need to make some, like, lower some people and raise some people artificially, and try to kind of force this unnatural state of affairs. And I think they're just willing to live with that and accept inherently, like, because I remember I did a reading of movie Bob's book, and he talked about how the white working class will always be against liberalism, because it innately, they're just the natural enemy of the left. And like I don't really remember exactly, but he went through and he made basically all the same points that you or me might make, but from the other side. Like, I do find if I'm listening to an SJW, I have more in common with them in terms of my worldview than I do with listening to a so-called conservative in Canada.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find that I find though that this kind of mindset. The reason I guess SJWs could be so insane, it's like the kind of mindset of this egalitarianism. When you take it to its logical extreme, it can create just complete nonsense. Like, for example, that's the only way that you can basically come to the conclusion that there's no correlation between letting tens or hundreds of thousands of Islamic migrants into Europe and an increase in sexual assault. Millennial Woes had said that the best way to understand how the Rotherham sex abuse scandal happened, and just how, like, there was so much cover up and just the amount of corruption that went on, and how just every aspect of society seemed to either ignore the problem or in many ways take part in it, or in some cases facilitate it. What he said was that it's kind of just like that. This egalitarian mindset has just twisted the minds of, in this case, Britain, so much that they can't really conceive of this. They can't really conceive that in their minds that it's a group of Pakistani men taking advantage of white young British women. That was, and like when you break it down, like, it seemed to be a mindset that just drives people to commit just unspeakable, like, just nonsense, really, just things that don't make sense at all. But when you have that worldview, it's like it can drive you insane, really.
Well, sorry, I lost my train of thought there.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, it's not your fault. Yeah, it's an interesting. Just keep talking. I'll see if I can.
Oh, that's no problem. Yeah, and I find that in the case of Canada, like, we're kind of in the same.
Yeah. I think what you have to understand, you're talking about the left, is they hate Western. They hate the West. Yeah. The people, the culture. They hate the religion. They hate everything about it. And until you accept that is the fundamental premise of what they want to achieve, none of it will make sense to you. You'll be like, well, how can the feminists work with the Muslims who want to throw the gays off of the buildings? But it doesn't matter. What matters is that they're against you. You have a common enemy.
Yeah,
that's right. They have a common enemy. You are their common enemy, and that ultimately matters more than whatever issues they have with each other.
Yeah, I think that kind of moving over to our country, Canada, I find that it's really in this kind of identity crisis, and that it's in denial of its own history, its own culture, its own people, really, and it seems to be completely, like, twisted by this. And in many ways, you're right that that kind of what's viewed as good is anything anti-Western, and that the kind of cultural ethos that Canada has, in my opinion, quite forcibly taken on, is one that's it's basically the highest evil is itself, and the highest good is tearing down itself. And this is where you get things like, diversity is our strength. Our culture is multiculturalism, and then like the apologies left, right, and center over
Sorry, just
basically
do
everything.
you find, because this is how I describe Canada, I find Canada to be the most self-hating and the most jingoistic country in the world simultaneously.
Yeah, I definitely think that in terms of countries that are just dead spiritually, culturally, yes, I think Canada is probably the most dead in the
No,
Western
no, I
world.
mean like
Yeah.
self-hating, but also like
Enthusiastic, like snobbishly.
to the point of I even call it jingoism. Like if you hear how much they hate Americans, how much they look down on basically everyone else in the world as being intolerant, it's literally like we hate ourselves more than everybody else in the world hates themselves.
Yeah, one thing that you'll notice about Canada is that the intelligentsia here, I guess they get high off their own farts by being more progressive than America. So if Trump shuts down the border, well, then we have to let in like tens and tens of thousands of
Yeah, which they're doing.
migrants. Oh yeah, which they are doing. If a state in the U.S. votes against I don't know, transgendered bathroom or like transgendered surgery for 8-year-olds, then we have to have it to prove that we are more tolerant than they are. That I do find is kind of like one of the major facets of the very warped identity that Canada seems to have taken on.
So my here's my thesis and kind of how we got here. I think to a certain extent, Canada's identity was we're more British than Britain. We're more loyal to the empire than uh, Britain is. If you kind of follow.
Yeah, I follow.
Okay, so we were really like we were very very pro Britain, and then what happened was when Britain decided that we don't want the empire, we're just going to be a country about guilt, and the empire fell apart. We kind of lost our reason to exist more or less because that's kind of how we had defined ourselves, and into that void we kind of sought multiculturalism, tried to feel kind of like the post-British Empire void.
Yeah. Like one thing I notice is that in Canada, if you look at a lot of old institutions, like all the banks, for example, RBC Bank, Royal Bank of Canada, the CIBC, Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, or TD Bank, Toronto Dominion Bank. These are all they're all names derived from the British Empire, derived from the Crown, and that really was the main identity of Canada. If I had to describe what Canada's identity, what it was, I think it had two. It was French Canadian and Anglo Canadian. I'd say that from the context of Anglo Canada, which I'm from, and I'm sure you are too. I'd say that Canada definitely took on the British like sense of excellence, the sense that Britain's this great civilization, and we need to like bring it to the world. And then of course it had this unique thing that Canadians were the ones who were loyal to the crown. And then I also would say that Canada also kind of took on a more like something uniquely Canadian about it, that it was like this sense of frontiersmanship, that we've conquered this frigid winter land, and we've created this great nation out of it. And I also think that there's kind of like this just humbleness in a way, which I think comes out very badly today. But yeah, it's like that. It's the I think of like, say, the lumberjack. This big hulking guy, but at the same time he's humble and he's proud of what he's done, but he doesn't go too far with it. And yeah, I mean that's kind of what I think of as Canada's original identity. But over the last 50 years, it's kind of I think you're right that the loss of the British Empire as this world force and us being a part of it, I think that like a lot was lost in that.
Yeah, I think it really led to an identity crisis that we weren't really able to fill. It was kind of like either we become American, which I probably would have preferred. Actually, we'll talk about it later, but we just decided we're going to be a multicultural country. It's it's really sad. I think I'm going to be honest. Of all the Western countries, I have the least hope for Canada.
I think that in terms of, I mean, in terms of materially, I don't think it's the worst off because
No,
you
it's
know,
not going to be the. It's not. It probably won't be that bad materially off compared to
yeah,
most.
yeah, I would say that yeah, definitely like spiritually, culturally, yeah, it's one of the most blackpilling. I mean, at this point, you know, at least we don't have like you know Pakistani child grooming gangs, or we don't
Yeah.
have like acid attacks, or like you know our cities are rough. I mean, yes, it is quite blackpilling, and I think it is a lot to do with just this idea that you don't have a culture, that you know our culture is multiculturalism, and it's just this there's just this big void that's being left, and you know the only yeah like kind of like I said our sense of good is being anti what can the real Canada, the original Canada. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I mean, and the thing that baffles me is in pretty much every other Western country, you do have some sort of counter-revolutionary force. And I get a lot of people hate like the Swedish Democrats or the Freedom Party or like the Front National or whoever, but they are people who are at some level saying we don't like what's going on and we want it to stop. And you just don't have that in Canada, like at all. There's no
And there
far right
is
here.
there. I mean the I guess the People's Party of Canada is kind of stepping
The
into that
Yeah, it's not
that
gonna. I don't think it's gonna
spot,
get
but
any significant support.
but I find that kind of a lot of this is caused by the lack of attention to tradition and to culture, and because you know liberalism doesn't the maintenance of culture or tradition, or just kind of the maintenance of a way of life, or a people for that matter. But because like a belief that I've come across through reactionary thought is that in order to maintain a society, it's kind of like a fire. You have to constantly stoke the fire. You gotta add to that fire. You gotta just like do all this stuff to maintain a cohesive society for the next generation. And there's been a specific lack of that in Canada for the last 50 years. There's just been like no attempt to really maintain you know that the sense of really who we are as in like a British derived country. And yeah, I think that's kind of just why there's just that people have just kind of forgotten so quickly, you know, who we are. I mean, you'll have people growing up today who don't even know that Canada has a monarch. Not that it's doing us any favors, but it's just that lack. I think that one of the biggest problems is the lack of maintenance of tradition.
Well, they're told about history. They're just told. Did you have to read Obeson in school?
No.
Okay. Did you have to read some shitty Canadian literature about how bad we are?
Yeah, we did. We had that stuff forced down our
Canadian
throat too.
literature is the worst. It's all just like how much we hate ourselves, that kind of thing. But no, that's something I used to really hate America, and part of it is envy, because there is a lot of I don't think you can say that the Americans aren't proud and that they don't care about their country's history.
Oh yeah, I'd say at this point, Americans have a lot more fortitude these days. Like you know, they still celebrate the Civil War, the American War for Independence. They're still big on those celebrations. I mean, Canada, we kind of celebrate
Remembrance
Remembrance Day,
Day.
but that's about it.
Yeah. Um yeah, it's okay. So someone's asking about abortion in Canada. For those of you who don't know, Canada, you can't even say it has the most liberal abortion laws on earth because it doesn't have abortion laws. Canada has no restrictions whatsoever on it. None.
Yeah, so as in if it's like the day before the baby's born, you can just rip it out and
Yeah, as is
kill it.
being born. That's pretty much what it's like in Canada. It's so bad. Our Prime Minister Justin, the devout Catholic Trudeau, kicked out all the members of the Liberal Party. He said no Liberal candidate is allowed to run unless they like sign a document saying that they're 100% pro-abortion.
Yeah, and yeah, I think that one of the problems I've also run into is that there's like a complete lack of morality, or really any kind of like idea that you know you might actually need to give up some of your own personal freedoms to for the betterment of society. Like, for example, things like abortion or same-sex marriage, drug use, and all these other things. Or then like, at this point, like transgenderism in school for 8-year-olds. But because in order to make like a society, in order for societies to actually have morality, I find that you need to have a sense of cultural cohesion. You need to have a sense of that, we as kind of a group of people, we want you to behave this way. And maybe it's not even legislated, maybe it's just like enforced through social pressures, but it really works to have kind of this like cultural backbone that will kind of guide people morally. And I think that's what Christianity really provided people for centuries. But and I find that liberalism, it really is, it says that, well, we don't need that, and the best thing possible is to just give people as much freedom as they possibly can have, as long as they're not harming others. And like, one of the problems I run into is that, especially in Canada, but other places too, anytime you suggest that you might need to have some standards, every time you'll get some like short-haired a woman on CBC saying, "How dare they say this? Oh, don't they know the 1950s?" Have you noticed that?
Well, the thing is that they won't bite the bullet. They won't just say, like, because it's just, they'll say, and this is especially something with boomer conservatives, oh, we support free speech. We support free speech, but, and then they'll list like 50 except. I wish they just say, no, we don't support free speech. We support this. Because I'm willing to, like, for instance, there's things I want censored. I generally would prefer it, but I think like pornography should be banned, for instance. I think a lot of, and I like violent movies, etc., but there is some stuff that I think, especially that's shown to kids, just shouldn't be allowed. But yeah, but I'm willing to admit there are limits to these things, and these people are intellectually dishonest, and they won't just come out and say it.
Yeah, I find that like today it's we've just been so used to being told that like the best thing is to just be as free as possible and to do whatever you want. And the fact that we really don't have any like communities anymore, we don't really have any ability to just have some public morals. You people do get into this mindset that like, how dare anyone suggest how dare anyone like suggest I behave in a certain way that may be for the betterment of society. Like, one thing that I think it was Millennial Woes that had brought this up was that in regards to things like, say, pornography, like if it were even like a couple decades ago, the idea that like, people would film each other, they would film each other having sex, like would have just been utterly shocking to people. And they would have seen that as something that was really just not good for society in many ways. And the problem is that it's something we can't even address, though, because it would be a limit on freedom, and that's something that you're just unable to do when you just don't have any kind of a cultural consensus.
Now, to be fair, and I'm going to disagree a little. I do think, if anything, we're almost too much in the other direction, that we have to have everything regulated in favor of what we consider the greater good. Because, like, for instance, your speech in Canada is like 100% controlled. The fact that neither of us can use our real name or faces when we're doing this, I think, shows we don't live in a free society. It's like in a lot of ways, the Chinese almost have more freedom in certain aspects than in Germany, at least they probably do, than in Canada. I mean, the degree, and the other thing is, even if it's not necessarily government, and this is something that normie conservatives don't get, is there's more ways to censor you than just the government. If corporations have a pact and they say, we're not going to hire you people who have said politically incorrect things, then that's like the same or worse than the government arresting you. I would honestly rather spend jail time than have like my career ruined.
Oh yeah, like for a lot of times, you get doxxed, and then good luck getting hired by any corporation or anything like that. I think that kind of standard, though, it's when I think of like the 1960s, I think of like kind of the a cultural revolution, the kind of like don't tell me what to do, screw your standards, screw your morals, that kind of like mentality. I find that that's like become the mainstream, and now that's the thing that's being enforced through that's the thing that's being enforced. It's that not only do we not have standards, it's mandatory that we don't have standards. And I often bring up things like pride parades as an example of that. Like, it's the result of having no standards at all, like whatsoever. Yet if you dare mention that, well, then you're going to find yourself in a lot of trouble. So like, they'll be quite vicious in enforcing the lack of standards,
No, but I think what you're viewing as a lack of standards is their standards. They in a lot of cases think it's better to do that than they think that's better than having like a traditional relationship. So that their standards are just alien to you.
Well, their standards are
it's
that they don't have standards. That like the standards are that you're not allowed to have standards.
Yeah, well, they say that. I think to a certain extent you're thinking in terms of that was really the Gen X thing, to just be kind of nihilistic and cynical about everything. I don't think millennial, they are in some ways and they aren't in others. If anything, millennials are extremely moralistic, like the whole fair trade thing, vegan, environmental responsibility, social responsibility. They're obsessed with the idea of kind of contributing to society. It's just they're doing it in ways that are incredibly destructive. Whereas I find with people Gen X, like people in their 30s, 40s, they just don't have that same drive.
Yeah. There does seem to be kind of the generational gap, and one of the problems is though that it's not just like these aren't really just petty morals, because at the end of the day, it does actually cause major societal problems. Like, for example, Canada hasn't had above replacement birth rates since the early 1970s. It hasn't. It has a divorce rate that's extremely high, and yeah, it's like we can't even address any of these problems because we just fundamentally don't see them as problems. If you have this like mentality that you should just be as free as possible, and like you can't tell anyone, you can't have any kind of public morals, you can't have any like cultural consensus telling people this is the best way to do it. You can't even solve those problems, really.
No, but like I think they do. I think they've decided our cultural consensus is diversity. Like when John Tory won re-election, one of his first statements was, "We do not tolerate intolerance. People who have basically non-mainstream views cannot be allowed to continue to live in this city." So I think there is a set of. I think if anything, these people are extreme moralists. Um, it depends what factor you're. If you're looking at kind of the Rainbow Coalition, yeah, they're just in it for the sex. That's their desire in life. But
yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that they are kind of like trying to now force this new cultural consensus, and yeah, now it is like you can't even question it. Like, I mean, we've had examples of people being like even Maxime Bernier. I mean, you can say the guy is not even that radical. He was just kind of he just said that like multiculturalism is not good if people don't assimilate, and he got essentially ostracized from the Conservative Party for that, for saying it, not even the Liberal Party.
Let's see what Kelly Leach said, because she got so badly trashed by the media. Kelly Leach said if people have ISIS flags on their Facebook profile pictures, maybe we shouldn't let them immigrate to this country. That was literally all she said. And that is considered an extreme. No, that's considered an extreme far right position. And I don't know if you saw what our prime minister said, because there is actually he was, I think, like a veteran from Afghanistan who had lost a leg or something, and he said, "Look, I'm concerned about these ISIS members coming back to Canada. I don't want them coming here." And Justin gave this lecture. He's like, "Well, people said that when Italians first started moving into Canada, and that worked out okay, and it's going to be okay with these guys." And it's just like, so, and then the media circled the wagons. I'm like, so it is a far right extremist position in Canada that you don't want known members of ISIS coming back to your country.
Yeah, and I think that kind of this kind of clown world, there's this nonsense. It's the result of egalitarianism, and it's the result of this mindset just spiraling out of control. Because when you do get in your mind that the greatest evil is yourself, your own civilization is the greatest evil, that and that's what needs to be torn down. You start making these you start making these decisions that are just ludicrous, like letting former ISIS members back into the country, just blatantly allowing people to cross the border illegally, and instead of calling them illegal immigrants, you call them irregular border crossers.
Well, no human is illegal.
Yeah, and it's just like I get the sense that Canada, and also to maybe even to a larger extent Britain, and many of the countries across the West, I find that this clown world is this egalitarian lack of confidence in your own civilization. It's that spiraling out of control. It's that thing reaching its logical conclusion, and the logical conclusion is the destruction of your civilization and your nation.
Right. But no, I just it's funny when people ask me, do you wish, because I have a lot of people in these circles really hate America. I personally really like America, but people are like, do you want America to annex Canada? I'm like, no, I don't want to add 10 blue states. This is why they have enough issues.
Oh, I don't know. I don't even know I don't even know. Yeah. But I think that going forward on how we're going to pull the country out of this mess, if that's even possible. But I'd like to kind of discuss what needs to happen. I think that the first thing that people need to realize is that there isn't going to be this liberal solution there, that through the lens of Enlightenment liberalism, of this sense that these people are interchangeable. We just need to give people education. We just need to be tolerant. We just need to have freedom and wealth
programs.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to through that kind of mindset, you're not going to be able to pull Canada or any country out of the kind of the situation that it's in.
And you know what, to me, my kind of road to Damascus moment was I went to LA on a vacation with my family, and I saw the way that blacks lived there. They're in the streets, they're like burning stuff in garbage pails. They live like animals. And I said to myself, because I was like, I don't know, a normie conservative or something, like I get that I'm not American, but you know what I mean. We spent trillions of dollars try on all these programs, all this education, all this affirmative action, and it hasn't made any difference. You've mortgaged basically the future generations to pay for this. You've culturally devastated your country, and it didn't really have any results. It's like, and it's even worse in our country with the natives. It's horrendous. I've heard people say it's like worse than what they've seen in the third world, the way they live.
And one of the solutions they came to is that they said that since they commit more crime, I think that they're about 3% of the population, but I think they make up almost a quarter of the prison population.
Yeah,
one thing that they said was that they're going to not give them as long sentences for the same crimes. That's just like kind of the clown world that's just kind of that clown world, just spiraling out of control. It's just like when you just have it in your head that egalitarianism, that everyone's equal. If you just give everyone the equal opportunity, it gets you to justify things like flat out letting criminals get away with crimes if they fall into one of these so-called oppressed groups.
Yeah, it's but like, I don't know. As I've said, they're the only group I really actually have a lot of sympathy for, because they aren't like invaders. They didn't just come here in the last 20 years to make a quick buck. They have like every right to be here. And I don't know what the issue is to give them more autonomy, to kind of try to make them the little independent nations or whatever. Um, I really don't like it. It's kind of I don't know.
Yeah, I got a question for you. Are we equals in the Brotherhood of Darkness?
Yes, everyone is an equal in the Brotherhood of
Yeah,
Darkness.
you know, one of my a guy that I had spoken to on my channel a couple months ago. He was his name was Elder. He was from South Africa, and what he said was that with critical theory, that the only time he ever saw equality was when there was a white man and a black man together begging, and other than that, you know, the idea that you can just make people the same, you just can't do it. Uh, but I think that kind of going on to what I think needs to happen. I think that if we're actually going to address many of these societal problems, we need to take a look at some, I guess you could say, classical wisdom, some pre-Enlightenment thought, and it tells you a lot about human nature. It tells you a lot about what kind of builds a healthy society, a long-lasting one. And I think if we actually take a long and honest look at these things, I have to think that at least most Western countries, I don't, if they actually, embrace some of these ideas and discard this, liberal enlightenment, I do think that they're savable and they're salvageable. I think. What do you think?
I think you are seeing it. I think, for instance, Italy is going to be fine at this point. I think they have a bit of suffering ahead, but I think they actually are on the right track, almost completely on the right track. I don't know if do you consider Eastern Europe to be part of the West?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, I think Poland and Hungary are going to be just fine. They have excellent governments. Um, I love how the idea of that, like, and this is what things have gone with, how weird things have gone. The fact that they believe that their state exists for the good of their people is something we have to praise them for. Like
Yes,
that it's
absolutely.
this radical thing, like that Viktor Orban saying Hungary exists for the Hungarian people is considered like an insane, like, radical thing to say.
Yeah. What one of the for me, like you had mentioned your like kind of Damascus moment. For me, it was when I was at university, there was this Muslim guy, and he wasn't even a Canadian citizen. He'd been there like 2 years, and he was telling me about things like white privilege and about I don't know, decolonization, and about how horrible we are. And I thought to myself, could I go to his country and say that about them? Could I go to his country and say how horrible Islam is and how horrible their people are and how we need to tear down their traditions? And I thought, no sane society would tolerate someone just so wantonly disrespecting the native, or well, not really the native, but the dominant population. And that's just where, and I mean, that's just, it's insane when you think about it. And this is kind of how, things like Cologne happen, things like Rotherham happen. And you just get like, you just end up, tearing down your own society with when it seems like your own government's just against you. Like you said, it's radical these days to say that your country exists for the well-being of the people in it.
Yeah, it's I think, yeah, it's yeah. No, we
Yeah.
need to have George Soros says we need to have one world. But yeah, I think Eastern Europe will be fine. I think Italy's going to be fine. Denmark really isn't in that bad a place as far as like northwestern Europe goes. Um, the rest of it though is in for a lot of pain in the long term.
Yeah, but I think though that I think that we can make changes if we do just like kind of change our mindset and do kind of just abandon these delusions we have in the modern world. I do think that that's why I'm a reactionary. That's why I find reactionary thought answers so many of these questions. I think that like if we embrace these ideas that people are different, they tend to like want to be with their own, and trying to force them together doesn't work, and that people do kind of need a sense of morality, that telling people what to do is not necessarily a bad thing if it can really benefit society in the long run. And and yeah, and that, there's nothing wrong with authority. There's nothing wrong with an anti-liberal government. There's nothing like, democracy is not the be all and end all. And I find like if we actually started to ask ourselves these questions and actually started to take them seriously, I have to think that Canada has a way out, and I have to think that most Western nations do, because Canada's never going to be what it was pre 1965. It'll never be that again. But I have to think that for the European population, I have to think that there has to be some way that if we just kind of change the systems around us, I do think that it's not over.
Right. It's funny because I had done a video a little while back, which was like a parody video, and in it I was saying like how we have to let these people into our countries, because if they stay there for like another moment, they're gonna die. We have to let them in. And then I also said, but it's such a terrible place that they come to. They were every single one of them was a doctor in their country, and we're hateful, so we don't let them do that. And you have that, but then you also like, you know what I mean? They'll say like how racist and evil our country is,
Yeah.
but how bad their country is, and that's why they had to come here. And they'll say like both of those at the same time.
Yeah, I think that in regards to things like, say, like diversity. I mean, in Europe, maybe they can just like, maybe the situation is reversible. I think in Canada and America, it kind of isn't. You're kind of stuck with it. I think that, but I have to think that I look at a place like the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and when I look at how it worked, how it functioned. People kind of have this misconception of Austria-Hungary, that it was this like unstable powder keg ready to burst. But people often forget that the Austrian Empire, then eventually the Austro-Hungarian Empire, it existed for hundreds of years, and it was originally the House of Habsburg, and it was this extremely diverse, extremely separated country. But the reason that it worked was not because they forced people together, they tried to make everyone the same, was because they just let people be different. And they let them, the Czechs lived with, the Czechs kind of had their own little area. The Austrians had their own, the Hungarians had their own, the Slavs had their own, the Slovaks, and so on. And yeah, and not only that, they didn't have this, it was a monarchy, obviously. So the political system wasn't this kind of zero-sum game of people fighting for power. And I have to think that, if I don't want to like diagnose exactly like what kind of state will be able to save the West, but I think that if you actually take into account just human nature, and actually take into account like more of the lessons that you can learn over history, you can learn from reading the ancients, there has to be a solution that I think you can come to.
Well, I certainly hope so. Yeah, it's kind of funny because most of the Polish people I know actually like the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They hate the Germans, they hate the Russians, but they don't think that they were treated that poorly within Austria.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean,
actually, like later on, they actively promoted Polish language and Polish culture within the Polish provinces.
Yeah. Because I think that one of the hurdles we really have is that we have this conception that liberalism is the only good system, and every other system's oppressive. But I think when you look at it historically, that's not really the case. Like, I don't think that, prior to the Enlightenment, I don't think everyone absolutely hated their lives. I don't think that under monarchy, everyone was horribly oppressed. And I don't think that under anti-liberal states today that it's necessarily terrible. I mean, if you could look at a state like Oman, you could look at a state like Singapore, you could look at a state like the UAE, and they're relatively wealthy, relatively safe states that are prosperous, and they're not liberal. Whereas you can see tons of countries in Africa that are just complete disasters, which technically are liberal democracies. And like, I feel like if we actually wanted to like address these societal problems, you have to break people out of this mindset that that, the only system that works is democracy. The only system that works is liberalism, and anything else is horrible oppression.
Right.
But yeah. I mean, what kind of solutions do you see to the problem? Do you think that there is any? And do you think there is any way out for? And I know you said like Hungary and Poland, but do you think that for any of the countries that are a lot more affected, do you think that there's any kind of lessons that they could learn to kind of solve the problem?
I think, and this is what I've said, I don't know what the solutions are, but I think as like our people as a group have to realize that we're a group and start trying to acknowledge that we have collective interests and pursue the collective interests. I think that's primarily the most important thing. I don't think we're gonna, at least for centuries, get back what we lost. But we have to kind of get a sense of identity together, and we need to stop digging the hole deeper.
Yeah, exactly.
Before we start digging our way out, we have to just stop doing it.
Yeah, I think that basically, yeah, first people do need to just stop digging the hole. But yeah, I think that one of the problems also is that we kind of just have deconstructed our complete identity. Like Canadians don't even acknowledge themselves as a real group anymore. It's just like, well, everyone in the world's a Canadian, but if everyone's a Canadian, but of course, if you're a old stock Canadian, well, you're only a Canadian, and you're not, and you can't ever be anything else. So it's kind of a lose-lose.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess we'll probably wind down shortly. We've been going for about an hour. This has been a good conversation. Yeah, I'll just ask Argent. Yeah, any last comments on kind of just what you kind of see in the future? What you kind of see? What lessons you think we really can learn?
Never elect a part-time substitute drama teacher as the leader of your country.
And never elect his father either, because I mean he's the one that put us on this path, if you ask me.
Yeah, but as I said, I will go vote conservative, and next time, like I they suck. I wanted Kathleen Wynne gone. And actually, Dougie's not that bad as far as like a premier of Ontario goes. He's really not that bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want Justin Trudeau gone. I don't care if a potted plant replaces him. I just want him gone.
Yeah. I mean, it's just demoralizing. I mean, when I look across the West, I see people like Salvini, Viktor Orban, and all these other like strong men, or Trump, and we're stuck with Justin Trudeau.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just an ode to just why you need. And that's another thing, why you need good leadership. Why you can't just have this soy boys and cat ladies running your country. They're going to drive it into the ground. I think just one of the lessons that people have just lost over time is that authority is not necessarily something that's bad. Having a good, strong leader is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that yeah, going forward, I think that Canada, yeah, is in a big mess. I think, yeah, spiritually, culturally, it is dead. But I think another thing that we should really do is that just having some kind of cultural revival of some kind. I think that's what will actually get people to stop digging the hole. If you actually can get people to at least acknowledge. Have a culture that's not multiculturalism, actually get them to acknowledge some of their history, some of their own culture, and maybe just restore some sense of pride in that. I think that's kind of what'll get people to change, really.
Right.
Yeah. Have you noticed any have you noticed any hopes of that happening? I mean, is there any kind of pockets of Canadian culture that you still really see as productive, or no?
In this country, I'm sorry to be Mr. Black Pill, but then again, I admit I live in a bubble and you live in a bubble, so maybe there are a lot of parts of this country that aren't that bad, but Toronto is the most black pilled city.
Oh yeah, Toronto is the most black pilled in the world. It's hard to not be black pilled when you live here. But I mean, if you do go out to the East Coast, or if you go to, say, Northern Ontario, or maybe even some places in the prairies, they might still be like, shit libs there, but it still is like a nice place. It still is a recognizable Canada, really. Or like Quebec City, for example. I mean, Quebec isn't, they actually seem to actually acknowledge some of their history, but
Quebec is really shit lippy. They just don't like non-French speakers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's my hope that at least something can be preserved. Like, if I look at a city like Charlottetown or like Quebec City or Newfoundland, there still is something there from that, and I hope that there's at least some part that we can hold on to.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I think that we'll probably end this shortly. Thanks for coming on, Argent. Yeah, and just anything else to say?
Nope, that's fine. For
Yeah.
my viewers here, please subscribe to Endeavor and upvote the video. And a link to my channel and my book is below. So if you want to support me, that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, and yeah, so I linked Argent's channel down below also, and go over subscribe to him. What kind of videos do you usually do? Like, I know you do a lot of videos on like culture and pop culture and memes.
I do that.
History.
I do some internet drama. I have a couple ongoing series making fun of. I've done like 100 episodes. It's called China Economy Strong.
Yeah.
And it's just like I sing in like a broken English voice, like China economy strong, and I like go through and just find like absurd shit from China. And then recently I started doing Venezuela economy poor. I kind of do just about a lot of different stuff.
Well, yeah, interesting. So yeah, thanks for coming on tonight, Argent. So go over, check out his channel, like and share if you want to help me get this stream out. And until next time, talk to you later.